This is HOA consequences. I did not raise my voice. I raised my evidence packet. I work as a public works field crew lead in Chicago, Illinois, and I know what public right-of-way is. I moved to Sequoia Terrace Association 2 years ago because the commute was shorter and the rent was manageable, and I needed that because I am paying for a family medical expense and every bogus fee hurts. The HOA was already aggressive, the kind of place where selective enforcement ramps up the moment you push back. But I figured I could keep my head down. The first sign of trouble was a notice on my windshield 3 weeks after I moved in, claiming my guest had parked in a fire lane when the curb was not even painted red. Deborah Taylor is standing in my driveway right now, holding a roll of bright warning stickers she peels dramatically. And she is yelling that my guest permit is invalid because the decal is slightly crooked on my windshield. She is the HOA vice president, middle-aged, short brown bob, blue blazer, white bucket hat, and she has that look on her face like she has already won. Behind her, a tow truck is backing up, the amber lights flashing, the wheel lift angling toward my front tire. I am still in my gray work shirt and white visor from the job site, and I just got home 10 minutes ago. She jabs a finger at my windshield and says, "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and if you cannot follow a simple decal placement rule, you do not belong here." I tell her the decal is valid. It is registered with the office, and the placement does not matter according to the rule book. She laughs and says, "I have done this before, and people fold every time." The tow operator climbs out of his truck, clipboard in hand, and glances at me like he is bored. Deborah hands him a yellow slip. No hesitation, and he nods. I ask the operator if he verified the work order, and he shrugs and says the HOA authorized it. I tell him I am parked on my own property, my permit is current, and there is no legal basis for the tow. Deborah cuts in and says, "Your permit decal is not valid because it is slightly crooked, and that is a violation under Section 12-4. I pull out my phone and start recording. She does not care. She steps closer and photographs my windshield from inches away, saying it is evidence. The operator walks around my car with a handheld plate scanner that beeps angrily while Deborah smirks. My neighbor 2 doors down, a guy named Marcus, who walks his dog every afternoon, is standing on the sidewalk filming from a safe distance. He catches my eye and gives me a tight nod. Marcus is a CPA, and he has warned me before that the HOA ledger has red flags all over it. I wave at him, and Deborah snaps at me to stop wasting her time. The tow operator slides the wheel lift under my front axle, and I hear the hydraulic whine as it starts to lift. I yell, "Stop! You are on private property and you do not have my consent." The operator pauses and looks at Deborah. She pulls a printed sheet from her blazer pocket and waves it in my face. She says it is a tow authorization signed by the board president this morning, and the management company already processed it. I scan the sheet, and the date is wrong. It says the violation was reported 2 days ago, but Deborah only showed up today. I point that out, and she rolls her eyes and says, "Clerical error. It does not matter." The operator lowers the lift and pulls out his phone. He dials his boss on speaker, and Deborah starts backpedaling mid-rant. She says, "Wait, I did not say stop. I said verify the address." The voice on the phone is gruff, and the boss asks if the vehicle is on HOA common property or private lot. The operator says private lot. The boss says, "Then you need owner consent or a court order. We are not touching it." Deborah turns red and snaps, "I am the vice president of this HOA. I authorized it." The boss says that is not how it works and hangs up. The operator unhooks the lift and climbs back into his truck without a word. Deborah is fuming. She peels a warning sticker from her roll and slaps it on my driver's side window, the bright orange square sticking crooked. She says, "You think you won, but this is not over." She storms off toward her car parked at the curb, and I stand there shaking. Marcus walks over with his phone still recording and says, "I got all of it. You need to file a complaint with the city and the management company today." I thank him, and he says, "No problem, but you better move fast because my neighbor is filming and posting in real time, and I need my evidence ready before the story gets twisted." I go inside and pull up the HOA rulebook on my laptop. Section 12-4 says permit decals must be visible and current, but there is no clause about crooked placement. I email the management company with screenshots and Marcus's video attached, asking for clarification. Within an hour, I get a reply from a manager named Linda who says the tow authorization was issued in error, and they are reviewing the matter. She also says Deborah filed 3 more complaints against me this afternoon for unrelated violations, including a claim that my trash bins are too close to the curb and my mailbox post is the wrong color. I let her think I was cornered because my trump card needed her to overreach. I am not showing my hand yet because the document I have proves the management company was never properly contracted or renewed, and I need Deborah to repeat her claim one last time, on record, before I drop it. I print the email chain from Linda, including one line where she admits the notice date was wrong, and I put it in a folder with the video and the rulebook screenshots. Marcus texts me that evening and says the HOA is escalating, a brand new fine that appears out of thin air with no vote is showing up on accounts tonight. The fine shows up in my online account the next morning. $50 for improper decal placement, $50 for unauthorized guest parking even though I did not have a guest, and a $100 towing preparation fee even though the tow did not happen. I call the management office and get a recorded message saying they are experiencing high call volume. I email Linda again, copying the board president and the compliance officer, and I attach the video and the email chain. No response. 2 days later, I get a fabricated violation notice with altered dates and recycled photos in my mailbox. The notice says I violated the guest parking rule on a date 3 weeks ago, and the photo attached is the same windshield shot Deborah took 2 days ago. The timestamp on the photo is blurred, but I still have the original on my phone with the correct metadata. I forward everything to Linda and add a line that says, if this continues, I will file a formal complaint with the City Housing Authority. Still no response. Marcus knocks on my door that evening and says the HOA is resetting cure deadlines so I can never be done with the dispute. He shows me his phone, and there is a group email thread where Deborah is telling other residents that I am a problem tenant, and she has proof I am violating multiple rules. She says, I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and people like him do not respect the community. Marcus says she is doing this to at least 4 other people right now, and they are all paying legal fees or moving out. I decide to fight it. I request a formal hearing with the board, citing the rulebook procedure for dispute resolution. The hearing is scheduled for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening, and the location is the clubhouse meeting room. Deborah emails me the day before and says I need to submit all evidence 48 hours in advance, or it will not be considered. I reply that the rulebook does not require advance submission, only that evidence must be relevant and provided at the hearing. She replies, rules have changed, and if you do not comply, your hearing will be canceled. I email Linda and the board president asking for clarification. And I get an auto reply from Linda saying she is out of office until next week. The board president does not reply. Marcus says this is classic. They are trying to box you out so you cannot defend yourself. I print everything, triple-check the rulebook, and I prepare a short presentation on my laptop. I also print a copy of the document showing the management company contract expired 6 months ago and was never renewed, which means Deborah has been issuing violations under a void agreement. Thursday arrives, and I show up at the clubhouse at 6:45. The room is set up with a long table at the front where the board sits, and rows of folding chairs for residents. Deborah is already there, sitting at the table with the board president, a treasurer, and a secretary. She is wearing the same blue blazer and white bucket hat, and she has a stack of printed pages in front of her. She glances at me and smiles like she already knows how this will go. The board president calls the meeting to order and asks me to state my case. I explain the timeline, the tow truck incident, the fake dates on the violation notice, and the fabricated fine. I show the video Marcus recorded, and I play the part where the tow operator calls his boss on speaker, and the boss says they need owner consent or a court order. The board president frowns and looks at Deborah. She waves her hand and says, "That video is taken out of context, and the tow was authorized under emergency provisions because the decal was invalid." I pull out the email chain from Linda and read the line where she admits the notice date was wrong. Deborah interrupts and says, "Linda is not here to defend that statement, and it is hearsay." I say, "It is a written admission from the management company, and I have the metadata to prove it was sent before this hearing." The treasurer leans forward and asks Deborah if she verified the decal before issuing the tow authorization. Deborah says, "Of course I did, and the decal was crooked, which makes it invalid under Section 12-4. I pull up the rulebook on my laptop and show the section on the projector screen. I highlight the clause that says decals must be visible and current, and I point out there is no mention of placement angle. Deborah says, "That is an outdated version of the rulebook." I reply, "This is the version posted on the HOA website as of this morning, and I have a screenshot with the timestamp." The secretary looks uncomfortable and starts flipping through her own copy of the rulebook. If you are enjoying this HOA chaos, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where I fight back and win. Deborah stands up and says, "This is a waste of time," and I motion to close the hearing and uphold the fines. The board president says, "Hold on, I want to hear the rest of his evidence." Deborah glares at him and sits back down. I take a breath and say, "I have one more document." I let her think I was cornered, because my trump card needed her to overreach, and now she has. I pull out the management company contract and place it on the table. I explain that the contract expired 6 months ago and was never renewed, which means every violation Deborah has issued since then is void, because the management company has no legal authority to enforce HOA rules. The room goes silent. The board president picks up the contract and reads it, and his face goes pale. He asks Deborah if she knew about this, and she says, "That is irrelevant. The board still has authority." I say, "Not under the governing documents. The board delegated enforcement to the management company, and without a valid contract, there is no enforcement mechanism." The treasurer asks if I have proof the contract was not renewed, and I show the signature page with the expiration date and a letter from the county clerk confirming no renewal was filed. Deborah says, "This is a technicality, and it does not change the fact that you violated the rules." I reply, It means every fine you issued is unenforceable, and every tow authorization you signed is fraudulent. The board president tells Deborah to sit down, and he says they need to recess and consult with their attorney. The hearing resumes 20 minutes later, and the board president says they are suspending all pending fines and violations pending a full contract review. He also says they are placing a moratorium on new towing authorizations until the legal issues are resolved. Deborah interrupts and says, "You are letting him get away with this because you are all too weak to enforce the rules." The board president cuts her off and says, "Deborah, you are out of line." She snaps back, "I have done this before, and people fold every time. And you are folding right now." The treasurer stands up and says, "Deborah, you just admitted on record that you have been using intimidation tactics, and we have video of you issuing a fraudulent tow authorization." The secretary adds, "We also have a complaint from Marcus about selective enforcement and altered violation dates." The board president says, "Deborah, I am recommending to the board that you step down from your position as vice president, effective immediately." She laughs and says, "You cannot make me step down." He replies, "Yes, we can, and if you refuse, we will call a special election, and the residents will vote you out." Deborah grabs her papers and storms out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The board president looks at me and says, "I apologize for what you have been through, and we will issue a refund of fees that hits the ledger like a slap by the end of the week." He also says they are changing the hearing rules so residents cannot be railroaded in the future, and all evidence will be submitted in writing 72 hours before the hearing, so both parties have time to review. Marcus catches me outside the clubhouse and says, "That was incredible." He shows me his phone, and there is already a thread on the neighborhood group chat where other residents are talking about filing their own complaints. One person says Deborah issued a fake violation for a mailbox color that was never in the rules, and another says she tried to tow their guest during a family emergency. The board president emails the entire community 2 days later and announces that Deborah Taylor has resigned from the board, and the HOA is conducting a compliance review of all enforcement actions from the past year. I get the refund check in the mail the following Monday, along with a letter from the board apologizing for the inconvenience and confirming that all violations against me have been dismissed. Linda from the management company calls me and says they are terminating their relationship with the HOA due to the contract issues, and a new management company will take over next month. She also says Deborah filed a complaint with them, claiming I harassed her, but they reviewed the video evidence and determined her complaint was baseless. 2 weeks later, I am pulling into my driveway after work when I see Deborah walking down the street with a clipboard. She does not look at me, but I see her stop at another resident's house and take photos of their trash bins. I call Marcus and tell him, and he says he already reported her to the new management company. The new property manager, a woman named Karen, no relation to Deborah, sends an email to the community the next day saying any resident engaging in unauthorized enforcement actions will face legal consequences. Deborah tries one more time. She leaves a notice on my windshield claiming my car is parked too close to the sidewalk and is blocking pedestrian access. The notice is handwritten on a blank index card. No HOA letterhead, no signature. I take a photo of it and email it to the new property manager with a note that says Deborah is continuing to harass me. The property manager replies within an hour and says she has contacted Deborah and warned her that any further unauthorized enforcement will result in a restraining order and possible legal action. Marcus texts me that evening and says Deborah is selling her house and moving out. He says the new board voted to ban her from attending HOA meetings for 1 year, and several residents have filed formal complaints with the city about her conduct. I feel a weight lift off my shoulders. I park my car in the same spot every day, the decal still slightly crooked on my windshield. And nobody says a word. The City Housing Authority reaches out to me a month later and says they are investigating the HOA for predatory towing practices and selective enforcement. They ask if I am willing to provide testimony and evidence, and I say yes. I send them the video, the email chain, the fake violation notices, and the contract documents. The investigator tells me they are also looking into the tow company Deborah used, because several residents reported similar incidents where tows were authorized without proper legal basis. The investigation takes 3 months, and during that time the new board implements a series of reforms. They publish a revised rulebook with clear definitions and procedures. They establish an independent appeals process for violations, and they require all towing authorizations to be approved by 2 board members and verified by the property manager before being issued. They also refund over $10,000 in bogus fees to residents who were targeted by Deborah. The city issues a formal compliance review report in June, and the HOA agrees in writing to stop predatory towing or face fines. The report also cites Deborah by name and recommends that she be barred from serving on any HOA board in the city. The tow company loses its contract with the HOA and several other associations in the area after the city revokes their business license for fraudulent practices. I get a copy of the report in the mail, and I frame the cover page and hang it in my garage. Marcus and I become good friends after all of this. He helps me review the new HOA budget and financial statements, and he spots several irregularities from Deborah's tenure that the board has to correct. He says the ledger shows she approved over $50,000 in unnecessary enforcement expenses, including payments to the tow company that were never properly documented. The board votes to pursue legal action against Deborah to recover the funds, and they hire a forensic accountant to review the records. Deborah moves out in August. The new owners are a young couple with 2 kids, and they tell me they bought the house at a discount because Deborah was in a hurry to sell. They also say Deborah did not disclose the HOA disputes or the city investigation, and they are considering filing a claim against her for non-disclosure. I wish them luck and tell them to join the neighborhood group chat, where Marcus has started a thread called HOA Accountability that tracks all board actions and votes. The new board holds a town hall meeting in September to discuss the reforms and answer resident questions. The room is packed, and several people stand up and share their stories about Deborah's enforcement tactics. One woman says Deborah tried to fine her $300 for having a flower pot on her porch that was the wrong color, even though the rulebook did not specify color restrictions. Another man says Deborah issued a tow authorization for his daughter's car during her college graduation party, and he had to pay $200 to get it released from the tow yard, even though the car was parked legally. The board president apologizes to everyone and says the board failed to provide proper oversight, and they are committed to rebuilding trust. He also announces that the HOA is implementing a new policy where all enforcement actions must be reviewed by an independent third party before fines or tows are issued. The residents applaud, and several people come up to me after the meeting to thank me for fighting back. One older woman hugs me and says, "You saved this neighborhood." I go home that night and sit on my porch with a beer, watching the sun set over the rooftops. My car is parked in the driveway, the decal still crooked, and there is no orange sticker on the window. My phone buzzes with a text from Marcus saying the forensic accountant found evidence that Deborah embezzled over $20,000 from the HOA operating fund by inflating vendor invoices and pocketing the difference. He says the board is turning the findings over to the police, and Deborah could face criminal charges. I reply, "Good," and I take another sip of my beer. The neighborhood feels different now, calmer, like a weight has been lifted. People wave at me when I drive by, and kids play in the street without worrying about some HOA enforcer showing up to yell at their parents. Marcus texts again and says the new property manager is hosting a community barbecue next weekend to celebrate the reforms, and he wants me to be the guest of honor. I laugh and say I will bring the burgers. The barbecue is a huge success. Over 100 residents show up, and the new board sets up tables and grills in the clubhouse courtyard. Marcus gives a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the transition, and he introduces me as the person who stood up to Deborah and forced the board to make changes. People clap and cheer, and I feel my face turn red. I shake hands with dozens of people, and several of them tell me their own stories about Deborah and how glad they are that she is gone. The board president pulls me aside and says the police have opened an investigation into Deborah for embezzlement and fraud. He says the forensic accountant found fake invoices, altered contracts, and payments to shell companies that Deborah controlled. He also says the board is working with the city to recover the stolen funds, and they are confident they will get most of it back. I ask if Deborah knows about the investigation, and he says she was served with a subpoena last week and has hired a lawyer. I leave the barbecue feeling lighter than I have in months. The next day, I get an email from the city investigator saying they are closing the case against the HOA because the board has implemented all the recommended reforms, and there is no evidence of ongoing violations. The investigator also says they are referring Deborah's case to the district attorney for potential prosecution, and they may call me as a witness if the case goes to trial. I reply that I am happy to testify. Marcus texts me a few days later and says Deborah posted a rant on her personal social media page, claiming she was unfairly targeted by the board and the residents. He sends me a screenshot, and the post says, "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized, and they will regret forcing me out." Marcus says several residents reported the post to the police because it could be interpreted as a threat. I do not respond, and I block Deborah on all platforms. The fall passes quietly. The new board continues to implement reforms, and the HOA feels more like a community than a dictatorship. The new property manager is responsive and fair, and she holds monthly open forums where residents can ask questions and raise concerns. Marcus is elected to the board in November, and he immediately pushes for more financial transparency and accountability. He publishes the HOA budget online and creates a public portal where residents can track spending in real time. In December, I get a letter in the mail from the district attorney's office saying Deborah has been charged with embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of authority. The letter says the trial is scheduled for February, and they will contact me if they need me to testify. I call Marcus and tell him, and he says Deborah's lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA is not interested because the evidence is overwhelming. He also says the board is filing a civil lawsuit against Deborah to recover the stolen funds and cover the legal costs. Christmas comes and goes, and the neighborhood is decorated with lights and wreaths. I put up a small tree in my living room and invite Marcus over for dinner. We talk about the past year and how crazy it has been, and he says he is proud of me for not backing down. I tell him I could not have done it without his help, and he laughs and says, "That is what neighbors are for." We toast with whiskey, and I feel grateful for the community we have built. The trial happens in February, and I am called to testify on the second day. I walk into the courtroom and see Deborah sitting at the defense table with her lawyer. She looks smaller than I remember, older, tired. I take the stand and answer the prosecutor's questions about the tow truck incident, the fake violation notices, and the altered dates. I show the video, the email chain, and the contract documents. Deborah's lawyer tries to discredit me on cross-examination, but the evidence speaks for itself. The jury deliberates for less than 2 hours and returns a guilty verdict on all counts. Deborah is sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay restitution of over $30,000 to the HOA and affected residents. The judge also bars her from serving on any HOA board or community association for 10 years. I leave the courtroom and walk out into the cold February air, feeling a sense of closure I did not know I needed. Marcus texts me that evening and says the board voted to use the restitution money to fund a community improvement project, and they want resident input on what to do with it. Suggestions include upgrading the playground, repaving the streets, and installing security cameras at the entrances. I suggest a community garden, and Marcus says he will add it to the list. The board schedules a vote for March, and the residents choose the playground upgrade by a wide margin. Spring arrives, and the new playground equipment is installed in April. Kids swarm the area on the first weekend, and parents sit on benches watching and chatting. I walk by on my way home from work and see families playing together, laughing, and I realize this is what the HOA was supposed to be all along. Not a tool for control and intimidation, but a way to bring people together and make the neighborhood better. I pull into my driveway that evening and see the decal on my windshield. Still slightly crooked, still valid. I smile and shake my head. The parking wars are over, the fines are gone, and the neighborhood is finally at peace. Marcus walks by with his dog and waves, and I wave back. He stops and says, "You did it, man. You actually did it." I shrug and say, "We did it." He grins and says, "Damn right we did." The HOA sends out a newsletter in May, highlighting the reforms and thanking the residents for their patience and participation. The newsletter includes a section called Lessons Learned that outlines the mistakes the board made under Deborah's leadership and the steps they took to fix them. It also includes a quote from me, though I did not know they were going to use it, that says, "An HOA should serve the residents, not control them." Marcus texts me a screenshot and says, "You are famous now." I laugh and tell him to shut up. Life goes on. I keep working my job, I pay my bills, and I park my car in the same spot every day. The neighborhood group chat is active and friendly, full of people sharing recipes, organizing block parties, and helping each other out. The new board is transparent and accountable, and the residents trust them. It feels like a real community now, and I am proud to be part of it. I think about Deborah sometimes, sitting in prison, and I wonder if she understands what she did wrong. I doubt it. People like her never do. But it does not matter anymore. She is gone, the neighborhood is better, and I won. That is all that counts. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.